Welcome back to Law and Crime. I'm Michelle Yu with a special update. Closing arguments are underway out in Boise, Idaho for the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. The state and defense both completed their initial closing, and we are still waiting for the state rebuttal. As you know, the 49-year-old Doomsday cult mom, Lori Vallow Daybell, is charged in the deaths of her two children, 7-year-old GiGi Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. She also faces charges in connection to the death of her husband's first wife, that's 49-year-old Tammy Daybell. Her husband, Chad, will be tried at a later date. The state had a total of 60 witnesses testifying against Vallow Daybell, and her team called a grand total of 0 people in her defense. Vallow Daybell faces a life sentence if the jury comes back with a guilty verdict. And to bring us up to speed, we have our eyes and ears. That's the one and only GiGi McKelvey, who has been in that courtroom since the beginning. Welcome, GiGi. So tell us, what were your main takeaways from the state closing?
Well, the state really just brought it home, I think. They outlined the affair as being the motivation, the money, the power, and showed some very graphic photos, again, to just drive home why we're here and the 3 lives that were lost. And so I thought the state did a really good job of condensing everything down in about an hour, maybe a little less. So it was very powerful. The jury was all ears. Lori was looking down a lot. Sometimes she would shake her head no at things that was said, write down things, have her attorney look at what she wrote down. So it was interesting to watch how she reacted to closings.
What about the defense?
You know, I have to say, considering the defense really hasn't had much to work with, I thought the closings were as good as they could have been. Archibald got emotional, actually, a couple of times talking about things, but we've been waiting and wondering, why hasn't she thrown Chad or her brother Alex under the bus? Well, they waited till closings to do that. Their closings have centered around, show me one text where she says, let's kill the kids. Seems to be Chad and Alex together all the time when the kids were dead the next day being buried. Lori was nowhere around when Tammy Daybell was murdered, and he kind of made fun of Chad and pretty much called him a loser who sold books, so little books that his wife had to go get a job that made $15,000 a year to support him, and essentially just made it to where Chad was persuasive. Brought in the fact also that Colby Ryan, who is Lori's oldest and only surviving child, and her sister Summer both said until Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow was a great mom.
GiGi, how is the jury reacting to all of this? Was there a lot of note-taking?
A lot of note-taking at times, but mainly they listened. I think at this point they've sat for 5 weeks. They know the facts. They know what they've heard. There were a few moments where they did write down things. Watched Lori a good bit, too, to see her reaction, which during the state's closings was just a couple of times she looked a little sad, but I mean, grinning and talking to her attorneys and things like that. So it's just kind of been all over the board with her emotionally. Now, when her attorney Archibald was up, she watched every single move he made. She didn't take her eyes off of him the entire time he was up.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I was reading your tweets today, GiGi, and you were saying that the duct tape images with JJ Vallow, they were presented once again. Lori Vallow still emotionless. Is that something that courtroom is all looking at her, all eyes being on her, that even now, you've seen this a few times now, there's still no emotion coming at her?
Yeah, I saw a lot of glances in her direction from the jury and the public when those photos were on the screen. There was no emotion. I think she glanced up maybe once, but just 30 seconds after, she's grinning and talking to her attorney. So it's just not there. The emotion is blank.
What is the overall atmosphere like out there today? Because we all know that this is wrapping up. How are people feeling? What is it like?
People are ready for justice. This has gone on for 3.5 years. There are 3 bodies, just in this case, a 4th if you include Charles Vallow down in Arizona. People here want justice for these victims. And from what everybody that I've talked to, their opinion, what they've seen over the past 5 weeks, the ones that have been here regularly say the state proved their case above and beyond, that she was right in the middle of it, wanted Chad, and the obstacles being Tylee, JJ, and Tammy were taken out, and that's why we're here.
I saw the footage of the packed courthouse, and of course leading the way was J.J. Vallow's grandfather, Larry Woodcock, who was very interesting this morning, played Queen, We Will Rock You, which was J.J. Vallow's favorite song. How was he, what was his aura like when he entered the courthouse?
I think he's hopeful. I think that this is a day where a lot of years of waiting and going through some very painful times of not knowing and then the legal process. I think there's relief that maybe this jury has heard the evidence and does believe she is responsible, and maybe they'll get some resolution, in the next few days with this aspect of the legal process. We still have Chad's trial to go at some point next year, but at least, hopefully with this verdict, they can sit back and digest what they've learned in the course of this trial, because a lot of it has been very painful and unknown to them up until this trial.
Well, speaking of Chad, I read that Chad Daybell's attorney was there for closings today. Is that right?
I did not see him upstairs. Sometimes he will go in the media overflow room. He's been here on a very regular basis, watching people's reactions as things about Chad are mentioned. So I have no doubt he's here. I personally have not seen him.
What do you expect to hear out of the state rebuttal now?
They just got to drive it home. They've got to go back and reiterate that Lori was not a puppet on a string. And we see in the text messages at times she is asking Chad, what level is JJ at? Which means, what's his death percentage? That shows that she was interested in knowing if he was close. And in one, not a 0 yet. I think things like that may be brought up on rebuttal to remind that jury Lori was active in texting about the status of how close her son and her daughter were to death.
So, GiGi, before we let you go, just take us through a quick timeline of what may happen, in the next few hours there in Idaho. You guys are now on a break. How long is that going to last? And then the state rebuttal happens, and then what do we expect?
Yep, 45-minute break for lunch, and we have rebuttal coming up, and then we've already had the jury instructions read, so I guess it'll be a matter of how long that rebuttal takes. Do they give them the case today, or do they let them go home and get a good night's rest and start fresh in the morning? And that's the big question we're all asking right now.
All right. Well, I'm sure you'll have a lot of answers for us later as well. GiGi McKelvey, you've done a fantastic job covering this trial. We hope to hear from you soon with more updates in Idaho. Thank you so much as you get back into that courtroom. And of course, if you want more from GiGi, you follow her Twitter handle at Pretty Lies and Alibis. And don't forget, we will bring you the verdict live whenever that does come in. And that will do it for me for right now. Keep it here on Law and Crime, because we will have much more trial coverage ahead right after this break.